He's smooth. He's sexy. There's no one quite like him.
Well, thank you.
Nice try, but actually today we're talking about James Bond.
For those who aren't familiar, James Bond is a series of spy novels created in the 1950s by author Ian Fleming. In the early 1960s, Albert Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman started to make films out of these novels starring Sean Connery in the title role. The films were a huge success and became a pop culture phenomenon.
By the time the 70s rolled around, the film started to get pretty silly, leading people to wonder if Bond had lost the magic.
After the somewhat disappointing The Man with the Golden Gun in 1974, the filmmakers took a little break to sort of get the series back on track. This led to The Spy Who Loved Me, which was a huge success, and while it still had some silly moments, it brought a bit of seriousness back to the franchise. Many thought this would be continued with the next Bond film, which was promised to be For Your Eyes Only. Then, this happened.
After the success of Star Wars and even other science fiction films like Star Trek, the filmmakers decided to cash in on this fad and make the next film based off of Fleming's third novel, Moonraker. There have been many people who have played James Bond, and in Moonraker, it's Roger Moore.
After Sean Connery famously left the role of James Bond, the part was given to Australian George Lazenby, who had no previous acting experience. And while many, myself included, thought Lazenby did a good job, some bad career advice led to him leaving the role as well. Sean Connery came back one more time for an at the time record-breaking salary that he donated to charity, and led to this.
Woo! Woo!
Well, he's certainly left with his tail between his legs.
So when it came time to cast the role again, it went to the producer's original choice after Sean Connery, Roger Moore. Now Moore was quite different than those that came before him. He knew he wasn't as tough as Connery, so he chose to focus on his wit, his charm, and especially his humor.
Such a delicate touch.
Sheer magnetism, Bonnie.
In order to depart from the silliness of the earlier films, producer Albert Cubby Broccoli promised that this film would be science fact, not science fiction.
What was that?
Let's start at the beginning.
The movie starts with an airplane carrying a space shuttle known as the Moonraker, and oh my god, what is wrong with that man's eyebrows?
It's the 70s. This is a much more braless and hairy time.
Oh. Two men hijack the Moonraker and take off, killing everyone aboard the airplane. We then cut and see what James Bond has been up to.
Turns out Bond is introducing another member to the Mile High Club.
And then, in true Bond fashion, he's held up and shoved out of a plane. World's greatest spy here, folks.
But you can't deny, this next scene is pretty awesome.
Yeah, actually I have to give that to you because the cinematography is great and it's pretty clear when they're using green screen, like when you see Jaws here, but whenever the stunt doubles are miles high and you're seeing exactly what's happening with this action, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it actually took them months to rehearse this and script it out on the ground because you can obviously only do it so many times in the air. And how they did this for safety reasons is the actors actually have parachutes underneath the suits that they're wearing, so it's quite clever.
Yeah, especially for the time. Remember,
yeah, it's 1979.
Yeah.
The scene ends with Bond escaping Jaws and floating safely down to the ground, while Jaws, meanwhile, falls and interrupts a carnival.
Surely that'll be the last time we see him.
Sure.
We catch back up with Bond, who is now at the MI6 headquarters being briefed by M, Q, and the Minister of Defense. You see, England was transporting that Moonraker shuttle for the Americans when it was hijacked, so now America wants answers for why it's missing.
So Bond is sent to investigate Hugo Drax, but not before getting some nifty gadgets from Q, such as a wristwatch that launches darts.
That certainly won't come into play anytime soon.
Sure. After visiting Drax's complex and having some witty banter with him, which is actually pretty good, Bond is then introduced to a new character.
Yes, my name is Bond. James Bond. I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
Dr. Goodhead then takes Bond around the complex and shows him a G-Force artificial simulator, where they then engage in some more witty banter.
Come on, Mr. Bond. A 70-year-old can take 3 Gs.
Well, the trouble is there's never a 70-year-old around when you need one.
Bond then decides to try out the G-Force simulator for himself. Meanwhile, one of Drax's henchmen takes over the controls and intentionally tries to kill Bond using the G-Force. The G-Force psychosis causes Bond to start thinking of horses' asses for some reason, and that reminds him of the wristwatch dart launcher that he has. He then shoots a dart into the odometer of the machine, which somehow causes it to break, and saves Bond.
Well, you know, the dart could clearly withstand all that G-force. Science facts, not science fiction.
Bond does what Bond always does.
This isn't the bathroom.
So after all of this, Bond snoops around Drax's estate for information and is immediately caught. And upon exiting, is immediately caught again by one of Drax's henchmen. Again, world's greatest spy here. Bond then decides to leave Drax's compound. His accomplice shortly thereafter is sold out, and Drax decides to immediately terminate her employment. Certainly, this scene has some sort of relevance and will maybe motivate Bond to avenge her later on.
Nope, she's never in the movie again.
Never?
Nope.
Well, then the scene's completely pointless.
While the scene may not serve a lot of point moving the plot forward, it's actually a pretty damn good scene. Let's look at it. I mean, just look at the cinematography right here. It's beautiful. The way it's shot running through the forest, and the music complements it so well. It really creates a great sense of suspense and fear. You're feeling what the character is feeling. To be in that situation would be quite frightening. It's almost like a 70s horror film that's done very well. Even though it may not move the plot forward, it's a really good scene, and it's worth noting.
Bond then uses the information he gathered at Drax's estate in order to track down a glass factory in Venice, in order to get some more information about the situation. Therein, he overhears the value of the glass that he's surrounded by.
If it ever came on the market, it would certainly fetch a price in excess of $1 million American dollars.
Certainly, this won't come into play anytime soon, right? Outside of the glass factory, Bond runs into another familiar character.
Dr. Goodhead.
After some more witty banter with Dr. Goodhead, Bond decides to take a relaxing gondola ride.
Bond is then attacked by a couple of Drax's henchmen.
I want to throw a knife!
In order to escape his attackers, Bond turns his gondola into a speedboat.
I'm sorry, what?
Have you ever ridden a gondola?
Touche. At least it can't get any sillier than this, right?
Sure.
Are you serious? This is so ridiculous that look at this! The pigeon does a double take! The pigeon!
I got nothing.
Later, under the cover of nightfall and in a disguise, Bond then tries to re-investigate the glass factory.
That hat throw might have seemed a little trivial and out of nowhere, but it actually was a nod to a tradition that started all the way back in the Connery films, where every time Bond would enter Moneypenny's office, he would throw his hat onto the hat rack. That is a tradition that ended with Roger Moore as James Bond.
But in order to infiltrate the top-secret laboratory, Bond has to watch as another scientist enters the building by an audio passcode. Now wait a second. Doesn't that sound familiar to you?
No, don't think so.
No, that sounds like Close Encounters.
Nah, No, don't think so.
Look, this guy even looks like Steven Spielberg.
I don't know what you're talking about, man.
That is clearly Close Encounters.
Nope, you're crazy.
While investigating the laboratory, Bond comes across some sort of poison that scientists are working on, and, in his discovery, accidentally kills 2 of the innocent scientists. World's greatest spy, folks. And then, on his way out of the glass factory, Bond... And all that glass that was so priceless and worth millions of dollars is shattered pretty irreverently. Again, world's greatest spy.
So much for that.
But of course, Bond inevitably wins and leaves one of those classic one-liners.
Play it again, Sam.
Boo! And then later, at Dr. Goodhead's hotel...
Jesus, stop it!
And for some reason, they instantly start doing it.
Have you ever seen a James Bond film?
Touché. It is then revealed that Dr. Goodhead is actually working for the CIA, but Bond doesn't trust her enough, and she doesn't trust Bond enough to work together, but they are working towards the same goal. Bond then tries to show M and the Minister of Defense the hidden poison factory that he had uncovered, but it turns out Drax is one step ahead.
This isn't the bathroom.
Ever tenacious and to prove himself right, Bond expands on a clue that he discovered earlier in his fight and decides to go to Rio de Janeiro for more investigation. So after killing 5 hours with his new female assistant, Bond and his assistant go to a parade where we see Bond randomly in a suit that in no way is ever shown again in the movie. Huh. So Bond and his associate are snooping around Rio when they are then encountered by a familiar associate.
But their encounter is short-lived as a group of partiers breaks the whole thing up.
Once again, we'll probably never see him again this time, right?
Sure.
The next day, Bond is monitoring flights that are taking off from Rio, great job trying to hide the wires, when he discovers that Dr. Goodhead is actually nearby. They decide eventually to work together, and they get on a cable car to go to their next destination, when Jaws attacks. One cheesy fight later, Bond and Goodhead escape from Jaws as he goes plummeting and crashing through a nearby building.
Well, at least the 7-Up survived.
And boy, could I go for a 7-Up right now, perhaps while taking a smooth drag on a Marlboro cigarette, while driving in my Carlson boat and taking photos on my Canon camera.
Ah, but don't forget to catch your flight on British Airways.
Of course! So after all of that blatant product placement and a really dumb crash effect, it certainly couldn't get any sillier, right?
Sure.
We didn't edit this.
That is in the film.
Now, the pursuit of Bond and Dr. Goodhead doesn't end with the defeat of Jaws. They're actually tracked down by more of Drax's henchmen, and they're captured into the back of an ambulance where they're pinned down. Bond manages to escape, but Dr. Goodhead is taken away. So, upon realizing that he has to rescue Dr. Goodhead... Wait a second! Did we, miss some sort of wipe or something that says 5 years later, because all of a sudden this is what we're given?
Actually, Bond didn't decide to just give up and become a cowboy in Brazil. He's actually on his way to the MI6 top-secret headquarters, and after some obligatory Q showing off his new gadget scenes, Bond is told by M and Q that the poison in the vial that he found actually comes from a rare orchid north of Rio that Bond heads to investigate. Upon arriving, Bond is yet again ambushed by more of Drax's henchmen, and after an exciting boat chase, Bond thwarts them by parasailing over a waterfall, while Jaws and the other fall over the edge.
Surely, this is the last time we see them. It would be pretty dang stupid for them to somehow survive this waterfall. So this is the last time we see them.
Sure.
Upon landing, Bond is actually led, or lured, into Drax's compound by a sexy lady. And Bond, being Bond, realizes that it's a trap immediately, and he says, "No, I'm not going across that bridge." World's greatest spy, everyone. Drax captures Bond and plans some rather elaborate ways to kill him. One involves a snake, and Bond relatively easily disposes of that. The other reunites Bond with Dr. Goodhead, and it involves them somehow escaping rocket fuel. It really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Science fact, not science fiction.
And we really have to address something here. The plot really lulls here. Up until the part of Rio de Janeiro, the movie had a very good pacing to it, and right now it comes to a screeching halt. Now, the movie will pick up again at the very end, at the climax of the finale, once they arrive on the space shuttle, but if you've noticed, it's gotten a little bit stale.
Well, let's talk about the plot here, because it's not really super explained well. They explain it a little bit later, but it's actually not a bad plot. See, Drax's plan is to take this poison from this flower, this orchid that he's found, and make it into, like, a weaponized toxic nerve gas. He has a giant space station in outer space, which is why he's manufacturing all these rockets, to make it up there, to shoot down and destroy the Earth's population, just humans, because it doesn't affect plants and animals. And he's taken, like, the fittest, like, the best fine specimens of humans on Earth, taking them 2 by 2 in the rocket ships to eventually come down and repopulate and make a perfect world. Now, that's a pretty good plot, but it doesn't really get all that it deserves in the movie.
So, even though the plot may be good, the movie certainly doesn't help.
Yes.
So to make a long story short, Bond and Dr. Goodhead manage to make it aboard the space station. Once there, they unblock the radar jammers, which allows the American Space Corps to come aboard.
American Space Corps. Who knew?
The American Space Corps then engages Drax's mercenary in a laser fight.
Okay, I give up on that one.
Amidst all of this conflict, Jaws actually turns coat and joins Bond as a good guy. He fears that Drax would inevitably kill him because he has messed up teeth and therefore isn't a perfect specimen. It's really, really bad writing.
Plot twist?
Bond finally manages to discover Drax's location and confronts him, but is held up at laser point.
However, he uses his wristwatch to get the upper hand, if you will.
But it turns out, Bond and Dr. Goodhead were too late. Even though they managed to kill Drax, the 3 globes containing the poison that will wipe out the human race has already been launched. So, now it's up to Dr. Goodhead and Bond to chase these down and shoot them down with lasers. After some decent tension, we discover that Jaws is actually still on board the space station as it's being destroyed.
Well, here's to us.
I'm not saying it.
Not saying what?
You know what I'm talking. He's dead. He's dead. I don't care what they say. He's dead. Do we ever see him again in another Bond movie?
No.
He's dead.
But they say he's alive.
He's dead.
Okay.
So with the 3 globes destroyed, the space station taken down, Bond manages to relax and get some R&R.
Take me around the world one more time.
Why not?
And that's Moonraker. Like this review, it tends to drag on here and there, but overall, it's a really good movie.
In my opinion, there are no bad Bond films, but this is definitely one of the worst. There's some beautiful locations and genuinely good moments, but it all gets overshadowed by the silliness. Still, it's a pretty good film, and while it was successful, the filmmakers realized that maybe they had gone just a bit too far, and for the next film, they finally made Your Eyes Only, and finally brought a more serious tone.
And that's the first episode of the RETRO-Spective. We really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have anything you'd like to say, feel free to add it in the comments below, and hopefully, we'll see you next time.